An astonishing number of Honda Jazz owners buy another, and the post-2007 generation version we're looking at here has kept them loyal. But the Japanese brand also needs to attract new converts to its clever little Super Mini, something that will be easier to do with this revised version, thanks to its smarter looks, better driving experience and optional hybrid power. For very good reasons, this is the Super Mini that industry insiders most commonly recommend. How exactly do you better a bestseller? Back in 2007, when they launched a new generation of their Jazz Super Mini, you had the feeling that Honda really weren't quite sure. Its predecessor, launched in 2002, was, after all, a car that had offered buyers something unique and revolutionary in its sector, a magic seat design that gave Super Mini buyers the greater practicality of a larger family hatchback. The result was over 30 international awards, residual values that were higher than any other rival, and a sales performance that saw the car consistently among the top 3 bestsellers in its segment, embarrassing cheaper contenders like Toyota's Yaris and Renault's Clio. It was quite an act to follow. Of course, the replacement Jazz kept everything that was good about its predecessor, even improving upon its versatility with a slightly larger, more practical body that offered more of a big car feel. But it wasn't enough. New Jazz needed a new, unique selling point, and the original version of this car didn't have it, but it does now. The plushest versions of this revised model now offer the option of a hybrid engine. This, the first car in the Super Mini sector to offer petrol-electric power. Now, it was high technology that pushed up the price, of course, also forcing Honda's engineers to develop a high-quality road-going experience and a smooth CVT automatic gearbox that also benefited more affordable petrol variants like the one we're looking at here. This, then, is the Jazz that Honda hopes will properly pick up where its successful 2002 generation predecessor left off. Let's check it out. Now, if proof were needed that a satisfying driving experience need have little to do with ultimate power, then this Jazz provides it. First, let's start with what hasn't changed: the near-perfect driving position, the smooth, willing, revvy nature of the iVTEC variable valve timing petrol power plants, the brilliant, feelsome quality of the manual transmission. Why can't other brands produce a gear change as good as this? And the differences with this improved model? Well, even if you can't afford the top hybrid version, you have its developers to thank for the improved ride and the more responsive power steering that you'll now find across the board in the Jazz range. The electric power steering setup used on the original version of this car was a PlayStation-like experience, devoid of much feel. This setup is much better, especially at higher speeds. The settings that have sharpened the handling are welcome too, and though they don't usher in Fiesta-style fun on twisting country roads, the Jazz acquits itself well, the nose edging wide near the limits of adhesion on tighter bends before the standard stability control system kicks in and takes matters into its own hands. It's all very safe and predictable, and, one suspects, precisely calibrated to suit the needs of typical Jazz customers. For these people, it'll probably be more significant to learn that a range of suspension tweaks have created in this car one of the very best riding Super Minis in the class. And they'll also appreciate some aerodynamic tweaks to the body shell that have reduced wind noise at cruising speeds. Under the bonnet, where it's a petrol-only lineup, most sales will be of the version that I'm driving here, badged 1.4 by Honda, though in actual fact it's a unit of 1,339cc in size if we're being pedantic. Now, it's the fastest of the mainstream Jazz variants, but with just 99 brake horsepower on tap, you shouldn't expect too much. Rest to 60 in this variant occupies 11.5 seconds on the way to a top speed of 113 miles an hour. That's only a fraction faster than the 12.5 seconds and 110 miles an hour that you'd get from the entry-level 1.2 litre petrol variant. Now, the only other option is the hybrid version that I mentioned earlier that uses the same 88 brake horsepower 1.3 litre petrol engine that's found in Honda's larger Insight hybrid, capable of rest to 60 in 12.1 seconds on the way to a top speed of 109 miles an hour. Now, it would doubtless be quicker matched to a manual gearbox, but Honda thinks, probably rightly, that customers shelling out over £16,000 for a hybrid high-tech Super Mini will probably want a self-shifter. Hence the return of the smooth CVT automatic gearbox that's standard on the hybrid and is an option on the petrol 1.4 that I'm driving here. The post-2007 generation Honda Jazz is certainly sleeker, a little more Civic-like than its predecessor, which is hardly surprising as the two cars were actually designed by the same person. Now, this revised version gets smarter projector-style front headlamps and restyled bumpers that have helped deliver a slipperier 0.33 CD drag factor. What's important though is that this car continues to be one of the roomiest and most practical choices in its class. Now, as with most Super Minis, you wouldn't really want to fit 3 fully sized adults across the back seat here for any length of time, but 2 adults will be perfectly comfortable, especially now that the rear seat backs recline by up to 73mm for greater comfort on longer journeys. But features like this you can find in other Super Minis. What really sets this one apart is the packaging brilliance that's made possible by the way that the fuel tank has been repositioned under the front seats. Now, that frees up the floor and makes it possible for the seats to be folded in all kinds of different permutations. That comes courtesy of Honda's Magic seating system, something that you'll need if the surprisingly spacious boot isn't big enough. Now, that may not be the case. You do, after all, get 379 litres in here with all the seats in place, which is more than you get in something like a Ford Focus from the next class up, though the capacity does fall to 303 litres if you opt for the hybrid model. You can make the best use of the space that's on offer too, thanks to the double trunk design, to this false boot floor that sits above this extra lower storage compartment. Now, the double trunk design means that this can be divided into 4 configurations depending on the type of load that you have to carry. But if that's not enough, then with the press of a button or the push of a lever, you can transform the interior of your Jazz in over 180 different ways. Let's say that you want to push forward the rear seats, for example, to free up 883 litres of total space and store something big, like a bicycle. Now, normally with Super Minis, you've got to mess about pulling forward the seat bases before retracting a seat back that often also has to have the rear head restraints detached too. Or you simply push forward the seat back and it flops on a seat base but doesn't give you a flat floor. Now, here it's different. You push forward the seat back with one simple lever folding mechanism and watch as seat back and seat base retract into the footwell in one quick fluid motion. With this done, you can not only store something as bulky as a bike, but if you're not using the front passenger seat, you can also recline it and accommodate something as lengthy as a 240cm pair of downhill skis. Garden centre shoppers, meanwhile, will love the way that the rear seat bases rise cinema style against the rear seat backs, creating a protected area in the footwell for tall items like plants. Plus, there's plenty of oddments space too. There are 2 different glove boxes, and I found no fewer than 10 different spaces in which to store my cappuccino. And at the wheel, well, there aren't too many trendy soft touch plastics on display, but Honda has still managed to create quite a nice upmarket feel thanks to a smarter, darker dashboard material chosen to contrast with the soothing backlighting used for the various dials, gauges and displays across the dashboard. Orange in the standard models like this one, and blue if you've gone for the hybrid. There's an airier, more spacious feeling than you'd expect in a car so small, even if you haven't gone for the huge optional panoramic glass sunroof. The carefully designed windscreen increases all-round vision, and thinned front A-pillars allow light to flood the cabin. The driving position offers a wide range of adjustment, and it should be possible for almost all sizes of people to get comfortable. Most mainstream conventionally powered Jazz models are sold somewhere in the £11,500 to £17,000 bracket. You'll need a premium of around £900 to go from petrol 1.2 to petrol 1.4 litre power. The hybrid variants are more expensive, of course. They sell in the £16,000 to £20,000 bracket, but once you've factored in their higher specification and standard CVT automatic gearbox, then you'll likely find that the premium to step up into one from a conventional 1.4 litre petrol Jazz actually isn't that great. As for rivals, well, if we're comparing with conventional 1.2 or 1.4 litre Jazzes, if we take a Ford Fiesta and a Vauxhall Corsa as equivalent competitors, then against a 1.2 litre Jazz, you're looking at paying around the same amount of money for a 1.25 litre Ford Fiesta and perhaps a few £100 more for a 1.2 litre Vauxhall Corsa. Compare those two against the 1.4 litre petrol Jazz and you'll find that the Corsa in 1.4 litre form is about the same and the Ford a few £100 less, but there's not a lot in it, which all makes this Honda a very tempting buy, as it'll be worth more at resale time. But what about the hybrid Jazz? Well, in comparison to eco-branded diesel super minis like, say, Ford's Fiesta 1.6 TDCi E-Kinetic or Vauxhall's Corsa EcoFlex with 95 PS, compared to cars like those, you'd be looking at paying around £1,500 more to own a hybrid Jazz. But against that, you've got to factor in the hybrid Jazz's cheaper petrol, its quieter engine, its arguably lower servicing costs, and its standard CVT automatic gearbox. All in the least expensive hybrid you can buy on the UK market, a car that's £1,500 less than Honda's larger Insight hybrid, itself £4,000 less than, say, a Toyota Prius. Instead of the sprawling lineup of engines and trim levels offered by rival manufacturers, Honda likes to keep things simple with its models. The Jazz range comes only with a single 5-door body style and a choice of two conventional petrol engines, a 90 brake horsepower 1.2 and this 99 brake horsepower 1.4. Plus, of course, there's the 88 brake horsepower 1.3 litre petrol electric hybrid. Now, whichever Jazz you choose, standard equipment is of a reasonable level, though it would have been nice to see air conditioning make the standard basic tally. But you do get a height adjustable driver's seat, electric mirrors, power front windows, remote central locking, and an MP3 compatible CD stereo with speed dependent volume control. Leather trim is now an option, and that panoramic glass sunroof is also tempting. Safety-wise, it's good to see VSA stability control make it a standard kit across the range. You also get 6 airbags and anti-whiplash active front head restraints. Honda has worked hard at improving the economy and the efficiency of the Jazz, but as far as the mainstream models are concerned, the gains have been modest. The entry-level 1.2 litre petrol version manages 53.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and puts out 123 grams per kilometre of CO2. Go for the 1.4 litre petrol with a manual gearbox like I've got here, and you get 126 grams per kilometre of CO2 and a combined fuel return of 51.4 miles to the gallon. The hybrid is the model to choose if you're serious about reducing your daily bills. It returns 62.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, and though it doesn't get under the magic 100 grams per kilometre of CO2 figure, it does return 104 grams per kilometre of CO2, which means that you'll get a road tax bill for the first year of motoring of precisely zero, and just £20 a year thereafter. Now, the Jazz has always done well in terms of residual values, mainly because the more mature ownership profile means that the cars are driven sympathetically, serviced on the nose, not destroyed by kids or loaned out to teenagers, just generally that they're more looked after. And that's one of the reasons why, after 3 years, your Jazz is likely to be worth around 52% of what you paid for it. That's far better than you get from a Fiesta or a Corsa. It's another reason also why insurance is relatively affordable. Groupings range between 13 and 17 for mainstream models on the 1 to 50 grouping scale. Ask any motoring expert to recommend the Super Mini they'd buy with their own money, and most will plump for this one. It isn't the feistiest car of its kind to drive on a twisting country road, but I'd trade that for this model's excellent ride and superb gearbox. Honda dealers will doubtless be pleased too that with the introduction of optional hybrid power, this car has an important and topical selling point. But at the end of the day, that isn't personally why I'd choose one. For me, it's still the cleverness of this car's packaging that impresses most, with its neat magic seating and TARDIS-like interior. It's true that equipment levels could be higher and cabin materials plusher, but against that, build quality is excellent and residual values unrivaled. It all explains why this car has such a dedicated following. Try one and you'll understand.